Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 132 of the podcast. My name is Dr. David C. Noe. I am here on a nice, somewhat cool October evening in the Vomitorium South, down in the bunker with my good friend and splendid co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. How are you this evening, Jeff?
Feeling good. I like the brisk out there.
It is brisk,
I like
isn't
a good
it?
Brisk.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yep. So it's feeling nice out there. I'm feeling good. Had a good day of teaching today, as I was just telling you about before the show. So it's been great.
Yeah, and in line with tonight's theme.
Yes.
If it's brisk, but it's a little less brisk, it's a smaller amount of brisk, it'd be
a brisket.
It'd be brisket.
Exactly. Right. Oh man.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm kind of sad how natural that came.
That just came in pretty easily.
It did. Yes.
Yeah. So
you're feeling all right?
I am feeling well.
Yep.
I'm feeling quite well, thanks.
You've got a trip coming up, right?
I have a trip coming up. I'll be traveling down to the great state of Texas. They know a thing or two about Longhorns.
Yes, they do.
I'm going to go to Baylor University, and I'll be co-leading with Dr. David White on their classics faculty and Dr. Patrick Owens.
Yes, who has been a guest on this show.
That's correct. Yep. He is at Colgate University this year. I think his teeth are gleaming, actually. And we're going to lead the Biduum Baylerense, a 2-day spoken Latin conference.
Fantastic.
Be doing that on Saturday.
Excellent. And you have not done one of these at Baylor before, right?
Never.
Right?
No. I've been to Baylor a number of times, but never led one there. So this is very exciting. Very
Excellent.
exciting.
Well, we'll have to definitely get a report on it.
All right.
The next show. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's new in the world of Winkle?
Not a lot new.
The wonderful world of Winkle.
Kind of halfway through the semester right now. I am knee deep in midterms, and so all the my least favorite part of the job is waiting through those blue books. But so everything's good.
So do you have a certain method? I would like to ask. You've got big stack of blue books, big tub maybe of red pens.
Yes.
How do you do this? You just toss them on the stairs wherever they land. That's the grade they've earned.
More or less. Like I have a big wheel that I spin.
Okay.
Exactly. It's got all the letters from A to F, and
right.
It simplifies things.
Simplifies.
It's really easy.
What's a typical comment that you might write on a student's paper if you are either praising or bringing the vituperation?
I think that probably the one that I write the most is something like, some really good thoughts here, but your evidence is much too general to fully address the question.
Nice.
I should have a stamp that just simply says that.
Yes, that'd be better.
Yeah, right, exactly. How about you?
Yeah, well, a common remark I used to make was AWK, period.
What does that mean?
Awkward.
Awkward?
Right.
There's
something decent here, but it's just so awkward. Like if I were passing you in the hall, right, you were carrying this paper and you read me this line, I would just feel really uncomfortable.
You kind of cringe a little
Correct.
bit?
I'd just move over to the side of the hallway.
So you would just literally write awk?
Awk, period. Well, because there's not necessarily anything wrong with it grammatically.
It's a style thing?
It doesn't fit the argument and the flow.
Yeah, right.
Maybe the brevity of the comment was what led to so many student questions, like, what's awkward about it? What does awk mean?
Exactly. And you're like, come on.
You got to see it.
Right.
And for the Latin students out there, there's a wonderful adverb that captures this: inepte.
Inepte.
The adverbial form of the adjective ineptus. It doesn't fit. It's not suited. Inepte. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, Jeff, what are we talking about this evening?
We're going to wrap up our look at Aeschylus' Prometheus Bound tonight.
Yes.
Which is the section we're on is going to be looking mainly at the Io episode,
right,
where she shows up and encounters Prometheus.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I was reading through something this week. Perhaps during the course of the episode, I'll remember what it was. But in the footnote, I came across this abbreviation: P.V. And for a split second, I said, "What? Oh, right." Prometheus Winctus.
Winctus.
Yes, you would have caught it immediately. It took me a split second, but as is so often the case in the older books, which I think on the whole are better, these plays often had a Latin abbreviation.
Right.
So now it would be PB.
Yep.
Then it was PV, Prometheus Winctus.
Right. Yeah. So Prometheus Winctus part 3 tonight.
That's correct.
3 in our final wrap up of our look at it. And we have a shout out tonight.
Yes,
Dave.
isn't this nice?
Yeah, you want to tackle this?
Yeah, I'll get it started.
Okay.
It's rather long. One thing I love about our listeners is that many of them are fine writers and quite conversational.
Yes.
Prolix.
It's very true. Yes.
Even.
Very prolix.
So here we'll give them a little bit of a, I don't know if you can say moment in the sun. That's probably too self-congratulatory, but here we go. So this comes from Mr. Michael J. Stell. Michael J. Stell. We'll read his alphabet soup when we get to the end. Mm-hmm. He says, I have been listening to the podcast for over a year now. Jeff, do you remember what the subject heading was for this email?
I don't.
Something like a long overdue shout out.
Oh, yes, that's
remember
right.
That?
That's right. Yes, I do.
I took a little umbrage at that.
Oh, how so?
Was he saying that he was long overdue in asking for one? Or we were long overdue in giving him one?
I think that's what it means.
You think it's the latter?
So now I'm taking it personally.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So Michael, we're supposed to know that you're listening, even though you never contacted us, and we're supposed to acknowledge you on the air, even though we know nothing about you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
There's a lot of ambiguity in that.
It is a lot of presumptuousness.
I would say so.
Yeah, but nevertheless, we're going to give him his shout.
All right.
Okay.
I have been listening to the podcast for over a year now. I teach humanities, theology, and philosophy at a classical Christian school in Maryland. Most of my own study and teaching has been on the modern period, but modern literature relies heavily on classic literature. I mean, just try to understand Shakespeare without knowing the classics.
A lot of people have tried.
Exclamation point.
Yes.
And let's face it. Now, I'll just say, I would not write awk next to this.
Okay.
I would put a large exclamation point or two.
Yes.
Meaning these are excellent points.
Yes, very good.
Keep it going.
Yep.
And let's face it, to teach at a classical school means one must know the classical period and canon. You guys have made learning the classical canon fun, and I even enjoy the puns. Jeff, don't read what's in the parenthesis.
I have to.
All right.
He says, well, most of the time.
Yeah.
Says, all right.
Thanks a lot, Michael.
I appreciate the honesty.
You do?
I do.
I'd rather be lied to. Tell me lie in the name of that, in the words of that famous poet. Tell me lies, tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
Yes, Fleetwood Mac, right?
Is that who it is?
That's who it is. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
You want to continue?
Yes, I like this. That in this shout out, he gets very specific about the topic
Yes.
we're talking about. This is great. So he says one of the texts that I teach is Frankenstein. Which has the subtitle, The Modern Prometheus. I was actually thinking before I got his email, I said we should mention that reference, right?
Or maybe even do an episode. That is a brilliant textbook. That is a brilliant novel.
It is a brilliant novel. It led me to do some quick reading about Mary Shelley.
Did you have some grading to do? Is that what led you to that?
Well, exactly. Often my mind will wander.
Right.
And so I did not remember the fact that she originally wrote Frankenstein at age 18.
And she wrote it in one night, if I'm not mistaken. The first draft was something like a 9-hour marathon.
Yes. And she ended up publishing it 2 years later when she was 20. But it's extraordinary.
It is.
I think we've talked on the show about how, when lives were more nasty, brutish, and short.
Yes.
That many of these people's lives, there's much more of kind of an impetus to get things done early.
Right.
But I can't imagine. It's just extraordinary that cranking this out, almost like Jack Kerouac and On the Road, just kind of cranking it out in kind of a one fevered session.
Really.
And Shelley does this as what we like a senior in high school.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Well, it is unbelievable.
Yep.
Well, there's, the possible parallel when the musician goes into the studio and records the whole album in one take or something.
Right.
That.
It nails it on the first take.
Yeah. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's it's a great novel. Maybe we should do an episode at some point.
It'd be wonderful. Yeah.
But Michael continues.
Yes. He says, while generally aware of the story of Prometheus, and we discussed why Shelley might have included that as a subtitle for the book, I have found your discussion of Prometheus Bound to open up many more avenues of exploration for the way that Shelley deals with the central tension of the book. What if man could, like God, create life? When I teach Frankenstein in the spring, I am going to have to go back and re-listen to those podcasts and expand our discussions of the book.
Oh, we like that, don't we?
I like that very much.
That should inflate our numbers nicely.
Yes.
What do you think, Jeff, just as we make our way through this very interesting shout out?
Yeah.
What do you think about the canard, the common canard that, the creature with the bolts coming out of his neck and this, square forehead and such?
Right.
That's not actually Frankenstein. He's supposed to be called Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, I think that's technically correct.
It is,
right?
but how do you feel when people try to hypercorrect? I'm trying to
Oh, I feel okay about it because I think I've been that person.
Have you?
Yes.
You've been the well, actually.
Well, I've been actually. I've been the well, actually guy. I try to tamp that down, but
I'm trying to leave that guy behind.
Yeah, me too. But it does kind of bug me when that creature is referred to as Frankenstein.
Yes, well, it was Dr. Frankenstein's monster,
yes,
but
Victor.
That's way too long. That's way too long a name. How's he supposed to fit that on a business card?
We should call him Phil, right? He does need a shorter nickname, right?
Yeah, Dirk,
right,
maybe.
So yes, I don't. Yeah, it doesn't keep me up nights, but
yeah.
I admit that's maybe bugged me in the past.
Okay,
right.
Okay.
Carry on, would you, Dave?
Yes, Michael says, I enjoy listening and I recommend the podcast to my colleagues and our new teachers as a fun and accessible way to delve into the sometimes daunting world of classical literature. Keep up the good work. That's very nice.
That's very nice.
That's excellent, Michael. And actually, I think we're almost at the end of the episode now that we've finished the shout out. So thanks for listening. No. Do you want to read some of Mr. Stell's distinguished accomplishments here? It's impressive.
Yes. So he is he's the Dean of Rhetoric, Dean of the Rhetoric School at the Classical Christian School in Kingsville, Maryland, Redeemer Classical Christian School. He has a Master's of Philosophy, and he is finishing up a PhD.
Wow.
I don't think he wrote in what, but I'm guessing philosophy.
I'd imagine.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what PhD stands for, right?
Piled high and deep.
Post-hole diggers.
Post-hole diggers.
Yep, I have one hanging in my garage at home.
So. Oh, nice, right. He is, as we say, he is ABD.
Right.
All but dissertation.
Yes, all but dissertation.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, good luck with ending that, because we know that
absolutely
that is a major accomplishment.
Yes, and apparently the tradition is when you see someone who has recently finished off their dissertation, you're supposed to give them a hug.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard this.
That didn't happen?
No. Are you setting me up for something?
No.
Okay.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
So if you see Michael, you got to embrace him.
Give him a hug.
Yeah, the PhD brotherhood. He's got a nice PS here too as well. Jeff, you want to read that?
Yes, he says, I have used the Hackett coupon code several times. That's awesome.
Yes, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, so take a hint, listeners. He says, unfortunately, I still have to use the Dakin Blecker coffee machine on a Christian school teacher's salary. Okay. Maybe the ratio 4 will be attainable for us poor hoi polloi on the front lines of making
Cue the violins.
Classics great again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael, for listening. We're very grateful.
We do. We appreciate it. That was great.
Yes, thanks so much.
All right.
Well, Jeff, we got to get into it, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Prometheus bound, we have to finish this off, and the story is headed in the direction of a wandering, forlorn, dewy-eyed, heartbroken, four-stomached young lady.
Yes.
Named
Io.
Io.
Yes. Right, and shall I dig into our opening quote?
Yes, please.
Yep. So this comes from an article entitled "Io's World: Intimations of Theodicy in Prometheus Bound." Not the Odyssey, but
no, Theodicy.
Theodicy.
Yeah.
So having to do with the justice of God.
That's right. You want a little pedantry?
Please.
Okay, so theos, God, and dike, justice. You shove those two words together, you get theodicy.
Right.
An account of God's justice in a wicked world.
Right. And so I thought this was an interesting take because, as we've talked about in the first two episodes, is that a typical interpretation of this play is that we're supposed to see Zeus as a tyrant,
right,
that he is inherently unjust, and Prometheus does not deserve his suffering. And I thought this was an interesting take. This is by one Stephen White from the Journal of Hellenic Studies from the year 2001.
That's just like yesterday.
Right. And he makes the argument that maybe that's not the best way to take this.
Okay.
Zeus as tyrant.
I'm interested in this. Can you read the quote, please?
Yes. So he says, taken straight and by itself, Prometheus Bound is a deeply subversive play. Its eloquent and defiant protagonist makes it one of the most compelling from antiquity. Prometheus, on stage from beginning to end, dominates the scene. We witness his binding in the prologue, we face his shackled body throughout the play, and we hear his tirades against tyranny, the litany of his gifts to mortals, and his vivid directions for the bewildered Io. To remain unmoved, we would have to be, as the chorus exclaimed, iron-hearted and made of stone. Sympathy for the rebel, however, exacts a heavy toll on his adversary. If Prometheus suffers unjustly, Zeus is a despot. And if he suffers for helping mortals, Zeus is a misanthrope. George Thompson's verdict is widely shared. That is, Zeus is a tyrant, and his rule is tyranny. We learn this from his own ministers, who are proud of it, from Prometheus, who denounces it, from the ocean nymphs who deplore it, and from the god of ocean, who is resigned to it. The fact is incontestable, and the only question is how the dramatist intended his audience to interpret it. Are we then to conclude that the rule of Zeus is arbitrary, cruel, and inhumane? And he suggests that, for the most part, most readers of the PV would say yes.
Yes.
Right.
So my first encounter with Zeus in any sustained way was as an undergraduate at our former institution. Mm-hmm. I probably had heard hints here and there, but remember, I didn't have any acquaintance really with classical literature until college.
Right.
And it was Dr. Richard Weavers, a man who taught us both, and I think taught me very well.
Yeah, same here.
He described Zeus as this. Zeus is a big brute that refuses to die. Right? He gets his way everywhere he goes. He terrorizes people. He's a big brute that refuses to die.
Yeah.
So the hallmark is power expressed by immortality. He can't be killed. That's stuck with me, and I have explained Zeus in that way to students in many settings, primarily to contrast him with the notion of the Christian God, who is also immortal, but is moral in a way that Zeus, at least in these plays, didn't seem to be.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
But I think we ought to test that principle here that White is laying down.
Right. Well, let me carry on with there's a part later in the article where he steers it towards his, which I think is a very intriguing thesis. I don't know if I buy all of it, but it's an interesting idea. So later in that same article, White writes, Prometheus gives Io what he already gave all mortals, instructions for survival and great expectations of Elpis, hope. But their encounter does more than exemplify his gifts. It also reveals how their ordeals are both parallel and complementary. Io's journey represents in the social sphere what the punishment of Prometheus does in the political sphere. Each dramatizes a process of acculturation as submission to the authority of Zeus, the subordination of women to men in marriage and the family, and the coordination of free citizens in the political community of Apollos. So he's kind of setting up the argument is that ultimately it's about both Prometheus and Io coming around to recognizing Zeus's authority, and that Prometheus, in what he's done, stealing fire and such, he's a rogue. He's kind of a loose cannon, and Io represents, even as unjust as it sounds to a modern moral Judeo-Christian audience, what she's encountered, her sexuality is also kind of now out of bounds. And so they've both got to be kind of brought under Zeus's umbrella. And so White's making the argument that ultimately the play, in conjunction with the second and third play, which are largely lost, is really about not subverting and fighting against Zeus's tyranny. It's about finding a place within it.
Okay.
All right?
So to reread just this one sentence here, which now as I look at it seems like the hinge of his thesis, each dramatizes, each being Prometheus and Io, a process of acculturation as submission to the authority of Zeus.
Yes.
So that's it. The play is about how we have to come to grips with a powerful but unjust God.
Yes, but I think he's also saying is that the focus should also be on how out of bounds both Prometheus and Io are in a democratic society that has a number of acceptable social norms. And so yes, Zeus comes off as a tyrant in the first play, but he's it kind of reminds me of advice that I was given as a teacher. It's like early in the semester, be harsh, crack the whip. You can always let up later.
Right.
And so maybe that's so Zeus ultimately is the power that kind of represents democracy as an ideal later on. That we have to kind of come under his rule to live properly.
Okay.
All right. Let me just read the rest of this. So he writes, to vindicate the legitimacy of these basic Greek institutions, the play envisions a chaotic state of nature in which both characters suffer. Io's wandering is a mythic projection of female sexuality, untamed by marriage, wild, vulnerable, and bewildered. In pointed contrast, Prometheus embodies male intelligence unrestrained by civic norms, bold and cunning, but blind to justice and moderation. Both represent capacities essential for the maintenance and renewal of mortal families and societies, maternal fecundity and clever ingenuity.
Can we pause there a minute? This is really interesting.
It is.
It may be too clever by half.
That was kind of my sense of it as well. It's like he's almost being contrary to the typical interpretation for the sake of being contrary.
I'm not sure. So Io subtly reinforces the need for women to remain supporters of the status quo because we see the terrible consequences for someone who ventures outside them.
Yes.
Even if it's against her will.
That's what I think he's saying.
Okay. Yes. Prometheus, however, is male ingenuity, brilliance, industry, diligence, all these Greek stereotypes, I guess.
Yes.
Taken to an extreme.
Yes.
No restraint.
Right.
So they both have to get brought down under the expectations of the culture in order for society to function.
That's exactly what I think he's saying here.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's a very suggestive thesis. I don't know what to think of it.
Right. Let me finish it up.
Yes, please.
Yes. Both, therefore, undergo ordeals designed to harness their creative energies, the delirious wandering associated with a young woman's sexual awakening, and the physical coercion required to subdue arrogant male strength. And both reap rewards when they accept their appointed stations. Io wins maternal joy and renown for adopting the matrimonial mean between abstinence and promiscuity, and Prometheus ritual honors for performing his delegated role in the cosmic polity led by Zeus.
Can we pause there?
Yes.
Okay. So the notion that male excess in matters of leadership and superiority and so forth, that's being disciplined or whatever the term is, harnessed, their creative energies are harnessed by him being chained to the wall, kind of.
Yeah.
That's a little bit persuasive, but what's the connection between a woman wandering around through desert places as a kind of harnessing of creative energy?
No,
that's a little bit of a stretch.
It is a stretch. I think that's the weakest part of the argument.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things he says elsewhere in his article, which in some ways it strikes me as kind of a no duh kind of point, is that, and it's good to remember, is that he said we consider Prometheus Bound on its own as kind of its own solitary thing without with forgetting that this was just the first part of a trilogy. So we have the titles, followed by Prometheus the Firebringer and then Prometheus Unbound,
right,
which we know involves a reconciliation between Zeus and Prometheus, and so
followed by Prometheus at the zoo.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I think White does a good job in remembering that this isn't the end of the story. Yeah, it just kind of hyper focuses on the injustice of Zeus. Right?
But to get back to the stupid joke,
yes,
it was funny last week. It's still funny.
It's still funny.
Okay,
exactly. Right.
All right. There's one final line in the opening quote.
Yes, the justice of Zeus thus operates in tandem in their parallel ordeals.
Okay, well that's clear. It does operate in tandem. But it's the connection that White is trying to draw between the suffering of the two individuals that I wonder.
I wonder too. I like I think I'm with you. I like how he kind of reframes how we should look at Prometheus there. The stuff about Io's wandering sexuality, I think, okay, he's trying to force a square peg in a round hole.
Well, the reason why that doesn't seem to fit so much is because I don't think she has a sense that she's coming to grips with the fact that she's an attractive woman. She's more like a hunted, like a poor hunted individual who's just been terrified.
Right.
That's why that part doesn't ring true. Maybe you haven't read it carefully enough.
Well, the only thing I could think of is maybe it falls under the heading of something like, Heracles is driven mad by Hera and kills his family.
Okay.
And while we feel sorry for Heracles as a victim there, he's still to blame for that bloodshed. So there's kind of that double causation.
Okay.
So maybe there's something going on with Io too. She's a victim, but she's also to blame at the same time.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, let's get into it then in our first segment, which someone has aptly titled, and I think it would be you, Jeff, Doe the Humanity.
Right. I didn't know you were going to read that aloud.
Well, it's funny.
Okay. So when we last left this, I believe we were talking about the ocean episode.
Yes.
And so he finally takes off in his big 4-footed winged thing pulled chariot.
So it's a bird with 4 legs, if you remember correctly.
Yes. And Prometheus says, before Io shows up, he has another brief interchange with the chorus in which he talks about, he muses upon his famous role as the creator of human beings.
Right.
And how about a little bit of Greek here, Dave?
I'd love that. So these are iambic trimeters. And it sounds something like this. These are from lines 437 through 441. Me toi chlide doke te made althadia. Sigan mesu noia de daptomai kear. Haron amaut an ho de prus alumenon. Kai toi theois etois neois tutois gera. Tissa los ego pantelos dio resen.
Very nicely done.
Thank you. Excellent. I just this week finished a book I had been working on for a long time.
Yeah.
Reading it, that is. It's Vox Graeca by W. Sidney Allen on the pronunciation of ancient Greek.
Yeah.
First published in 1968. I say working on it for a long time because I'm not a linguist, I'm a philologist, and so some of the arguments were really difficult, and it was slow reading.
You need to kind of take your time, go through it. Yeah, worth it?
Well, yes, it's kind of an occupational requirement. I wanted to have read it so that I can be aware of the different arguments.
Yeah.
Worth it in terms of a lot of takeaways? Maybe not. But at the end of this episode, I have a couple of bon mots I want to share with you.
Yeah. So. That's really, I would love to hear more about that. I remember it teaching, when I did teach the languages,
right.
Questions I would get from students like, and telling them, these are the differences
right.
in pronouncing.
Vowel quantities,
exactly
consonants.
Right. And the students went, how do we know that?
Yes.
They're dead languages. How do we know?
They were just trying to avoid the quiz.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But it's an important question.
Yeah, it is a very important question. All right. So let me give a little bit of our translation here. This is, again, reminder of our translator's name. I'm just blanking.
Deborah Roberts.
Yes.
Professor Deborah Roberts.
Yes. So Prometheus says here, don't think it's delicacy or stubbornness that keeps me quiet. He's talking to the chorus, the daughters of ocean here. My knowledge eats my heart as I see myself mistreated in this way. And yet who else but me distributed in their full privileges to these new gods? No need to speak of that. You know the story. But listen to the miseries of mortals, childish until I made them intelligent and capable of thought. You want to read a little bit from there, Dave?
Oh, that's very nice. I do just want to comment on one aspect of her wonderful translation.
Yes.
I think this part, my knowledge eats my heart.
Yeah.
I think that's the line of the translation of sunoia didaptoma ka'ar.
Yes.
I am feasted upon, daptomai, I am feasted upon heart-wise, ka'ar, in my knowledge, sunoia. She got that really nice.
That is great. Dave, you want to pick up the translation there?
Sure. So I'm beginning at, I tell you this.
Yes. Yep.
I tell you this, and again, Prometheus speaking to the chorus, not to cast any blame on human beings, but to show the kind intent in what I gave. At first, they saw, but seeing was no use. They heard, but didn't hear. Like shapes in dreams, they passed long lives in purposeless confusion. They knew no homes of sun-warmed brick or wood, but lived like swarming ants in lightless caves beneath the ground. They had no way of telling when winter would arrive or flowery spring, or summer with its fruits. In everything they acted without thought, till I explained the risings and the settings of the stars, so hard to read. And I did more for them. I invented number, cleverest of devices, and writing, hard at work to help recall all things to memory, the muse's mother. I was the first to yoke wild animals as slaves of pack and collar, so they might take on the weightiest of mortals' burdens. I harnessed horses to the chariot, delight of the extravagantly rich. That'd be like the Tesla, right?
Yes.
No one else but me invented sailing ships that roam the sea with linen wings outspread. I found all these contrivances for mortals, but to my sorrow I have no device by which to escape my present misery.
So all of these wonderful things that he did, for not only creating human beings, but teaching them and giving them all of these these inventions. Yeah. So one of these questions that I often get from my myth students is, why did Prometheus create human beings?
Right.
So I mean, the obvious corollaries, he creates them out of dirt and mud, and so it makes you think of
Mudman,
of Genesis, or the Enuma Elish, or these Mesopotamian stories about the creation of humanity. But why does Prometheus do it? Mm-hmm. Why does he care so much?
There really is no reason given.
Yeah, it's really is quite puzzling.
And it strikes me that we have this phrase Socratic irony, but we don't have a phrase Promethean irony. But I think that at the end of this quote, which I think may be the same one that Professor Roberts read for our very first episode, which is just fine because it's beautiful poetry, there's a tremendous irony here. He created all these devices, but to my sorrow, I have no device. I can't get out. It's like the person who digs himself into a hole, kind of, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's a wonderful piece of kind of dramatic irony.
Yes, Promethean irony.
That's All right, so
we go on from this, Jeff.
Look, we got to move on from this. Yeah. So, but Prometheus assures the chorus that who are constantly worried about Prometheus' own sufferings, that he assures them that one day the tyranny of Zeus will end, and he will have to bend the knee to fate and necessity, just like everybody else has to.
So, how does that square with Stephen White's theory about the meaning of the play? Does that mean everything is going to be upset in the end? Or if the purpose of the play is to reinforce the norms of Greek culture, as relationships between men and women and man's place and woman's place.
Yeah.
How does the fact that Prometheus says Zeus will be replaced at some point. How does that fit the thesis?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, I guess we could say we know how the story goes is that Zeus isn't replaced. But I mean, Zeus does come around. He has to end up compromising with Prometheus. He does have to make a bargain with him to get this information that he needs. I don't know how that fits with both Prometheus and Io coming under Zeus's control and having to kind of submit to him.
So Greek society continues on. They swap Zeus for another god, or it doesn't really matter who the god is. He's just a stand-in for the reinforcement of social structure.
I don't know. I don't know. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's keep it in our pocket and see where we go.
Right.
And so then finally, Io shows up.
She shows up.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a typical interpretation of the play of who these characters represent, that Ocean represents Prometheus's peer, the god's point of view, another way of kind of looking at Zeus's newly found power, and then Io represents,
because he's a Titan.
He's a Titan,
right?
And Io represents humanity.
Okay.
And so
Io.
It's off to work we go.
That's right.
Oh man, that's terrible.
That's yours.
I know, it's still terrible. Yeah. So I thought we could talk a little bit about the background to Io's predicament, although it's fairly well explained within the play itself.
I would think.
Yeah.
But it's worth looking at Ovid for just a brief moment.
Right.
We don't want to spend too much time on it because then we can't do an Ovidian vignette on Io.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. I thought maybe this first paragraph that we have in here might just set this up nicely.
And this is the A.S. Klein translation?
Yes. Okay. Which you can find free online. It's a really good translation.
Is it poetry.com? Is that
poetryandtranslation.com?
Poetryandtranslation.com.
Yep. He's got a ton of stuff that he's translated.
Yeah, it's quite good.
Yep. Read this for us, Dave.
Okay. So this is right after, what is it, lines 587 through 600?
In book 1. Yep.
Yes, of book 1. So Jupiter first saw her, that is Io, returning from her father's stream, and said, "Virgin, worthy of Jupiter himself, who will make some unknown man happy when you share his bed, while it is hot and the sun is at the highest point of its arc, find shape in the deep woods." And he showed her the wood's shade. "But if you are afraid to enter the wild beasts' lairs, you can go into the remote woods in safety, protected by a god. And not by any lesser god, but by the one who holds the scepter of heaven in his mighty hand, and who hurls the flickering bolts of lightning. Do not fly from me." She was already in flight. She had left behind Lerna's pastures and the Lyrsian plains' wooded fields, when the god hid the wide earth in a covering of fog, caught the fleeing girl, and mistreated her.
Yes. Yeah, it's a brutal story.
It is.
And I mean, as you're reading that, it reminds me there's a lot of stories like this in Greek myth, this pattern. It reminds me of Apollo and Daphne, where he speaks to Daphne in a similar kind of way as he's chasing her down. The ending there is different, where she is saved from the violence of the god by being turned into a tree.
Yes.
Io does not escape that violence.
No, she doesn't. And she has the wisdom to escape before he even finishes the speech.
Right.
Because she knows the violence that he represents.
Exactly. So as the story goes then, another very typical part of these stories is Hera is upset by...
or Juno in Ovid's telling.
Yes, Juno is upset by Jupiter's infidelities, and she takes out her anger on the woman.
Right.
And so...
And I guess the reason she does that is because she can't take out her anger on Jupiter. He's too powerful.
He's too powerful. Right. He's a big brute.
He's a big brute that refuses to die.
Right.
Right. I mean, you must have encountered schoolyard bullies in your day.
I did.
Were you afraid of them?
There were a couple that caused some nightmares for me. Absolutely. Yes. Big Zeus's
really
wandering the playground. How about you?
Well, I encountered many, and because of my stature at the time, which was I don't know, even then not very significant, there were bullies, that frightened me. But I always seemed to have a sense, maybe it was Promethean, that an appeal to an adult would settle this. I knew I was never in any real danger, because there were teachers and principals and adults around. I mean, sure, they weren't always paying close attention, and the guy could stuff you in a trash can before they got there.
Yeah.
But I think this kind of emboldened me, because I knew, they can't really do anything very serious to me. Call me some names,
So you had that kind of awareness even as a little
think
kid.
So.
Yeah.
I think that kind of gave me a sense of comfort. I mean, what are they going to do to me? Right?
Yeah.
Teacher so-and-so is right. Mrs. Nelson's right over there. Right? So I know they're not going to
Yeah.
So
it never came to fisticuffs?
It did come to fisticuffs.
It did.
Once in a while. Yeah. I had the great blessing of being raised in a setting that wasn't especially violent, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if this were, not really at all. Right. If this were a playground in some more dangerous area where the bully was carrying, something other than a pack of Wrigley, I'd have probably been in trouble.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. So Zeus he's a bully.
He's a bully.
So Io is eventually she's changed into a cow.
Yes. Why? Can you explain this?
Well, I mean, I've read a number of things. I mean, Io is. I mean, she has these other associations with the moon,
right?
And the horns, the crescent horns of the moon is often an ancient symbol used.
Well, I guess not why was she changed into a cow? But why was she changed into a cow?
Gotcha. Well, go ahead and answer this question for the audience, Dan.
Well, I think it was Jupiter's attempt to hide her from Juno.
Right.
Make her inconspicuous.
Yes. And then he sets this famous creature, Argus, to guard her, to watch her, right?
Yeah. And why did he do that?
Oh, well, why indeed?
Because when you're guarding a cow, the stakes are high.
Oh, man, we gotta nip this in the bud, man. You know how Michael Snell feels about your puns. He likes.
Is it Snell?
Oh, what did
It is
Michael
Stell.
Sorry, Michael.
That's right.
Right.
This could go on for a long time.
Oh my gosh. So anyway, so Argus is this creature with the 100 eyes, right, all over the body.
You would think he's the perfect security guard.
Yes, right. Yeah, and it
no smartphone, every eye peeled.
Yeah, exactly. I'm guessing that Odysseus named his dog after this creature.
That's right.
The watchdog.
Who better to guard your things than someone with 100 eyes?
Yes. And so I think I mistaken. Jupiter doesn't set Argus. It's Juno who does this, right?
Because she's afraid. She knows that Jupiter is going to try to get at Io.
Yes.
In other words, the concealment, the disguise did not work.
Yes.
Juno found Io out.
Right. And then so Zeus in turn seeks to rescue Io and sends Hermes down to basically bore Argus to death, right?
Was Hermes like a classics professor or something?
Some of those, but yeah, kind of speaks in a nasal monotone for hours, and one by one puts all of those 100 eyes to sleep, and then kills the creature.
Yeah,
and
it's terrible.
It is terrible. And then again, Hera comes back as Io's now wandering around the world, being chased by this gadfly that she's set upon that constantly is stinging Io, and we in this play we see her in these constant throes of unending pain.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to read this part about Jupiter transforming Io into a heifer from Ovid a little bit?
Is that the second paragraph that we have here? Yeah. So sure. Meanwhile, Juno looked down into the heart of Argos, surprised that rapid mists had created night and shining daylight. She knew they were not vapors from the river or breath from the damp earth. She looked around to see where her husband was, knowing by now the intrigues of a spouse so often caught in the act. When she could not find him in the skies, she said, "Either I am wrong or being wronged." And gliding down from heaven's peak, she stood on earth ordering the clouds to melt. Jupiter had a presage of his wife's arrival and had changed Inachus's daughter, that's Io, into a gleaming heifer. Even in that form, she was beautiful. Saturnia approved the animal's looks, though grudgingly, asking then whose she was, where from, what herd, as if she did not know. Jupiter, to stop all the inquiry, lied, saying she had been born from the earth.
Because that will happen, Jeff. Cows will just spring up out of the earth.
Yeah.
So Zeus is not only a bully, but he's pretty stupid.
He is pretty stupid. He's not clever.
No.
He's not clever. Right. Then Saturnia claimed her as a gift. What could he do? Cruel to sacrifice his love, but suspicious not to. Shame urges him to it. Amor urges not. Amor would have conquered shame, but if he refused, so slight a gift as a heifer to the companion of his race in bed, it might appear no heifer. So that's the story. That's how Io becomes a cow, and then the business with Argus comes after this.
There is here, Jeff, in Ovid, a little bit of a sketch of some of the sufferings that she experienced.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as extended as what we'll see in the Prometheus Bound.
Right.
But maybe I could just read a few lines of that.
Yeah, please do.
So, Io grazed on the leaves of trees and bitter herbs. She often lay on the bare ground, and the poor thing drank water from muddy streams. When she wished to stretch her arms out to Argus in supplication, she had no arms to stretch. Trying to complain, a lowing came from her mouth, and she was alarmed and frightened by the sound of her own voice. When she came to Inachus's river banks, that's her father, where she often used to play, and saw her gaping mouth and her new horns in the water, she grew frightened and fled, terrified of herself.
Those are some really powerful lines.
It is. It's comic tragic, though.
Comic tragic, and that it's just it's kind of ridiculous to imagine. Yes.
It is, and yet he is such a skilled poet. He can create genuine sympathy out of something ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's what strikes me, at least.
I remember reading something, an article on Aeschylus, where Lucius, who turns into a donkey.
Yes.
That story has a similar kind of experience where he's trying to get used to his donkey limbs, and it was suggested that he was probably borrowing from this episode.
Oh,
yeah, so it's really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of gaping mouth and new horns,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
All right. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the good people at Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, these guys have been with us from the very beginning of this podcast. They are one of these companies that is keeping the flame alive.
Absolutely.
So they're doing on a kind of a macro scale what we're doing on a more micro scale here, right? And so they are the purveyors of classical text. They've been in business for 52 years now, since 1971, with offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Dave, tell us a little bit about what you like about Hackett Publishing.
Well, I like the affordability of the texts.
Yep.
I like the breadth of selection, the accessibility. I don't like the covers.
You don't like the covers?
No, I like them fine.
Right.
I'm just trying to poke you a little bit.
Right, exactly. Just not as much as I do.
No, nobody could. I like the fact that for several titles, they have multiple translations. Just this week, someone asked me, well, it was in a public forum. They weren't asking me in particular, but it was a general question, recommendation for Thucydides. And I thought, well, I bet Hackett has something. So I went to Hackett, and yep, there it was.
Sure enough.
And affordable and nicely done. I could recommend it to that individual with no hesitation, confident they were going to get an accurate and good value translation of Thucydides.
Yeah,
so I like that.
Exactly. So I love it. I teach a population of students that generally speaking doesn't have a lot of disposable cash on hand, and so when I think about textbooks, I'm always trying to be mindful of that. But I have no hesitation of ordering Stanley Lombardo's translation of the Odyssey from my myth class, because I know my students can get it for $7-8.
Yes,
and
incredible.
It's incredible. So listeners, do yourself a favor, go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Check out their massive selection. It's not just classics. They've got stuff from all over.
South American studies in Asian philosophy, modern philosophy, art.
Yes.
Runs the gamut.
Religious studies. Check it out. And be like Michael Stell.
That's right.
And use this coupon code.
Be like Mike. That's what you're saying.
Right. So find the text that you want. Drop them in the basket. Type in this coupon code, AN2023. And Dave, that'll get them two wonderful things.
Yes, it will get them 20% off.
Yes.
And I'd like to say that Professor Roberts has a new translation of Aeschylus coming out in the spring.
The Persians,
right? The Persians in the spring of 2024. So you might want to snag that if you have enjoyed her edition of Prometheus Bound that we've been reading. 20% off and
free shipping. Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Now, can we say enough good about Ratio Coffee, Jeff?
I think we can.
Okay, right. We can say enough good?
We can say many excellent things about Ratio Coffee.
All right, so this morning I wake up, I have my very rich and satisfying breakfast. I had a friend coming over to sit in the sunroom with me and talk for a bit, and I thought, I'll just make some excellent Ratio Coffee. And I did.
Yes.
And it was a smooth, seamless, satisfying process. Everybody needs little rituals, right?
We do.
And this one is delightful.
Fantastic. You have the Ratio 8, right? Yours is, you've got the...
It's oyster color.
With the walnut accent.
With a walnut accent. I picked oyster because I thought it would kind of match the general decor of my kitchen.
Yes.
And you know what this means?
What does that mean?
I can never move.
Right. That's right. You're stuck. Right?
I'm there forever.
Right. All updates have to be done around the coffee machine.
I'm on the Ratio. That's right.
That's right. Yeah. So I have the Ratio 8 too. I've got the stainless steel.
Oh, stainless
steel, and the recently acquired.
What color is your carafe?
It is. Well, I was using the glass carafe.
Yes.
But now I have
hand blown borosilicate.
Yes, and now I have the stainless steel, weighty
hulking flagon.
The hulking flagon, which keeps it warm for hours. Right. So yeah, I love my machine, and yes, my kitchen would be much poorer without it.
So you have the 8.
Yep.
You had the 6.
I did.
But what's coming down the pike?
We got the Ratio 4.
Oh, yeah.
Down, I believe early in the new year. I believe
that's the hope, right?
Yep.
This is going to have the same technology, the same innards, to use some Latin, the same viscera.
Nice.
You think so?
Yeah.
The same viscera of the 6 and the 8, but a smaller footprint and more accessible price point, which means not as expensive.
Right. But made with the same high quality.
Absolutely. Really high standards.
Yep. So, listeners, go to ratiocoffee.com. That's RATIO coffee.com. And look at these machines. The right now the 8 and the 6. Keep an eye out for the 4 coming. And if you like what you see, if you want to invest in your coffee future, pick one of these machines. And then, Dave, what should they do once they do that?
Yeah, well, they should enter this coupon code. But actually, if they enter ratio coffee and then / and then they spell out the word 4.
Yes.
FOUR. They can get a little sneak peek.
A sneak peek.
A sneak peek.
Yes.
That's what the words aren't coming. At what is coming down the line.
Right.
But if they go there, they should enter this coupon code ANCOF7.
Right, and that F stands for
Flavonoids.
Flavonoids. Gotcha.
Because that's what's in your coffee. Flavonoids.
Right.
And what will this get them, Jeff?
That will give them 15% off their entire order.
Incredible. Check it out. All right, Jeff. Well, as we get back into it here, and we start the wind down, right? Because it's pretty late now.
Yep.
Io makes a big impact, doesn't she?
She does. She comes in bewildered, confused, and we immediately see her, this woman, in deep pain.
That's right.
So let me just read. I'm not going to read this whole section I have here, but just a few lines where she shows up. The first thing that she says, again, this is Robert's translation. She says, "What land? What people? Who is this I see in a harness of stone facing wintry storms? What was the crime that called for this death? Tell me, where on earth have I strayed in my grief?" What I thought was so interesting about Io's entrance, and this goes on in her speech as it continues, is that yes, we see her suffer terribly, and we do hear about her sufferings, but her first concern is about Prometheus.
Yeah,
and she feels bad for him. And she wants to know about his pain before she asks about her own. And I thought that is
remarkable,
really striking, right?
So she is moved to compassion, even though she is herself in the midst of torture,
of pain. And I think that is so incredibly humane.
It is,
and moving,
or bovine.
It's very bovine, right? Yeah.
Right. I was also struck by, you'll forgive me for this, I think, that her total lack of knowledge of the geography. You know that I come from an agricultural background. And I learned recently that there are now fenceless cows in parts of the West. They're wearing a collar that, like a dog collar, can deliver a slight electrical stimulus.
Yes.
And this collar has a GPS chip in it. So you do not have to actually establish a fence for cows at all. When they reach the point where you want them to stop,
they'll feel the little jolt.
They'll feel the little jolt on their neck, and they'll turn around and head the other way.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so Io was obviously totally lacking in this. She had no idea where she was.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, I think that's a big part of her suffering. She's wandering without any. There's no goal in mind. It's just it's wandering and suffering. And so the last thing on her mind is where she is.
Right. Yeah. But this initial response is, what was the crime that called for this death?
Yes.
Immediately followed though by an expression of her own agony.
Right. Do
you want to read that part, please?
Yeah, sure. So she, the pain, it stings me again. I'm wretched. The gadfly, the ghost of earthborn Argus. Get him away. Oh no, the terror. I see him, the herdsman with countless eyes. He and his shifty look keep pace with me. He died, but the earth does not cover him. He comes from below to hunt me in my pain and drives me starving along the sandy shore. And I think Robert has a footnote on this. This is kind of an Aeschylean originality where Argus is dead, Mercury or Hermes has killed him, but she still is haunted by
the ghost
him.
of Argus.
Yes. So it's not just the gadfly, even the ghost of Argus is following her. Yeah.
But then in the midst of this threnody, she starts to speak to Zeus directly, right? Calling him son of Kronos. What wrong did you find in me that you yoked me to such pain? And wear me down, wretched and frenzied, in fear of the gadfly's sting.
Yep. So she, like Prometheus, is a victim of Zeus and is suffering, as it appears, unjustly for no fault of her own.
Right.
And so again, that seems to, on the face of it, counter White's thesis is that we're really meant to see her as kind of a representative of kind of female sexuality that's gone beyond the bounds. I'm buying it less and less.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now when you hear the words from her own mouth.
Yeah.
She was not a willing participant in any sense.
Right.
What bound did she transgress?
Exactly. And that's what makes her so sympathetic.
Exactly. So Prometheus reluctantly tells her
Yep.
Many more wanderings and sufferings are ahead for her.
Right. So
it's got to be hard news to deliver.
Hard news to deliver, especially given that we remember that Prometheus, he tells the chorus, one of the gifts that he gave human beings is that he gave them blind hopes. He took away the ability to see their future. If they could see what's coming, they'd go fetal, right?
Right.
And this is what Io begs of him. Please tell me. And he's reluctant to tell. He says, okay, you've got a lot of bad stuff ahead of you.
That's right. So I think we should read this dialogue, this stickomythia here. One of us should be Prometheus and one of us should be Io.
Yeah.
Shall we draw straws?
No, I'm going to let you choose. Who do you want to be there?
Well, I don't want to choose. That's too much responsibility.
Okay, well, then I'll choose.
The pain. Go ahead.
I will be Prometheus.
But I wanted to be Prometheus.
I knew this was going to happen.
Okay, you be Prometheus.
And you will be Io.
And I'll be Io.
All right, just a brief setup first. So Prometheus has told Io about all her wanderings and sufferings to come, but he tells her, but hold on, as terrible as Zeus is, he is going to fall one day, or at least there's that possibility. So there's a silver lining. And so that's what he's going to tell Io about in this dialogue.
Okay.
So Prometheus starts and says to her, go ahead, be happy. What I say is true.
By whom will he be stripped of the tyrant's scepter?
By himself and his own empty-headed plans.
How so? Explain if there's no harm in it.
He'll make a marriage he later comes to regret.
With a god or a mortal? Tell if it can be said.
Why ask that? It's the part I mustn't speak of.
It is his wife who makes him lose his throne?
Yes. She'll bear a child who's greater than his father.
And there's no way for him to escape this fate?
None, unless I help him once I've been released. Yes.
So how was my Io?
Not bad. Not bad. I could maybe I could
a little too deep.
A little bit more, and maybe a little bit more kind of whiny and high pitched.
Okay.
Right. So we'll work on it.
All right. I was trying to get some, bovine undertones in there.
Right.
So.
Exactly. I heard a little bit. It was
okay.
Right.
So does Prometheus know the future, or can he control the future?
I thought this was kind of an interesting place. So we often think of Prometheus as his gift is that he knows everything that's going to come, and which he does. But this is a place where he does seem to kind of hold the future directly in his hands. Right. So if he doesn't give Zeus the name of this woman, which, as we know the story, this is Thetis, right, who will become the mother of Achilles, then Zeus will mate with this woman and produce a son that will overthrow him. Right. If he gives Zeus the name, maybe he can use it as a bargaining chip to be released from this punishment.
Right.
So it is one of these places where Prometheus seems to know two futures, and it's really kind of up to him to decide which path is taken. So,
like the Choose Your Own Ending book.
Exactly. Did you ever have those?
Of course, we've talked about it before.
Oh, have we? Really?
Yeah, those are excellent.
Yeah. I used to have a shelf full of those things.
Yes, and I would just go right to the end and read all the alternatives.
So Prometheus, in some ways, he's trying to cheer Io up, right? And he's saying so that Zeus will fall. But then he adds to this by saying, hey, not only that, but
now Johnny Pop, you've got a pop culture reference right in here.
I do. Yes.
Yeah.
So he describes Io as kind of being an ancient Forrest Gump. So not only is this going to fall, but you have a role to play in this.
Run, Io, run.
Right. And he talks about in these various places she goes in her wanderings, she kind of she sows the seed for some mythic tradition
and fertilizes it.
Exactly right. And so she sows the seeds of later monumental events, and various personae are
right.
deeply linked to the future. So she has a very important role to play in this whole story.
So do we know that she's pregnant with Zeus's child at this point?
I don't. Well, I think he Prometheus more or less kind of announces it.
Yeah. Right.
So she says
she's due to calve and to calve in not too long.
Yes, exactly. Right. So he says that her son by Zeus, Epaphus, will be an important kind of part of the roots of Egyptian culture.
Right.
And some have even seen in his name the connection to the bull with the god Apis.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I now remembered where I was reading this, actually, about the PV. It was in ML West's The East Face of Helicon. And he does mention this connection between Epaphus and Apis.
Well, is that right? Yeah. Excellent. Good.
There's some linguistic connection.
Yeah. And then he also mentions that the Danaids, this group of women who who take vengeance on their kind of their unwanted, forced upon them husbands,
right,
by killing them. They wind up in the underworld. And I thought that was maybe interesting, is that maybe in a kind of an implied, almost revenge by proxy, of Io being taken advantage by Zeus.
Right. Her descendants, kill off her attacker. Their attackers.
Right. And one of the Danaïds is survives, and she's the one who then becomes the mother of Heracles.
Yes.
Who will then one day come.
Alcmena, right?
Alcmena, yeah.
Right.
And he will come and ultimately be instrumental in freeing Prometheus from his bonds.
But Prometheus has to wait a long time.
A long time, and so does she. Right. So this is many, many generations in the future, and Io's own wanderings still have a long way to go. But it kind of brings their two stories together in this really kind of fascinating,
definitely
wonderful, satisfying kind of way. Yeah.
Definitely. But he's got to wait a long time for this, doesn't he, Prometheus?
He does.
So thousands of generations.
Yeah. So Io then ultimately does leave, still crying in pain, but she has at least some hope.
Some elpis.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So then how does the play end? What's the note of resolution here? Does the chord resolve, or are we left with a kind of
it is an
discordance?
It is a discordant note that it ends on. So Hermes shows up, a very un-Hermes-like Hermes. He's usually the prankster, the jokester. This is not the Hermes who shows
He's the guy that would have his own late night talk show.
Totally. Right. His own kind of comedy podcast.
Right.
He's the jokester that shows up in the Odyssey with the Aphrodite and Ares episode.
Right.
This is not that Hermes.
This is more of the Hermes of what's the analogy?
Well, I mean, he comes down. It's just because speaking. He is the voice of the anger and the mockery of Zeus. And so he shows up, and let me read a little bit of Robert's translation. He says, speaking to Prometheus,
So I'm sorry. This is This is Hermes.
Yes.
Speaking to Prometheus.
To Prometheus. Yes.
Okay.
You, the wise one, bitter and more than bitter, the one who wronged the gods in furnishing honors to mortals. I mean, the thief of fire. My father orders you to name this marriage. The one you boast will make him fall from power. What's more, he tells you not to speak of riddles, but say things as they are. Don't burden me with a second trip, Prometheus. Don't make me come back again.
Doesn't he want his frequent flyer miles?
You would think.
Yeah.
Right? You see, Zeus isn't softened by such ways as yours. It struck me. I wonder if we're supposed to see kind of an irony here, is that Hermes is mocking Prometheus for being a thief.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that Hermes is the god of.
Right. He's the patron god of thieves.
Right. He steals Apollo's cattle on this first day of life.
That's correct. The first day of his life.
Right. And here he twists the knife, and this is the first place in the play where Hermes says, so not only are you going to be chained to this rock, but these birds are going to come, and they're going to peck at your heart, they're going to peck at your liver, and your agony is going to be tenfold.
So he's a fool, right, for not giving Zeus what he wants.
Right. And even the chorus says, give in. Just give him what he wants. And it's here that kind of Prometheus really reminded me of Job.
Yeah.
Right. And with all of his friends saying, curse this god. Look what's happened to you.
Yeah.
And be done with it. But Prometheus says, I will endure this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now we're right near the end, aren't we?
Yep.
Prometheus has this closing speech.
Yes.
Can I read this?
Yes. These are the last lines of the play. Please.
Okay. And now, in fact, no longer in word, the earth is shaken. The roar of thunder replies from the depths. Fiery coals of lightning flash forth, dust eddies and wheels. Every gust of wind leaps to contend with another in angry display. Sea is stirred up and mingled with sky. This onslaught from Zeus comes at me openly, to fill me with fear. Oh, my revered mother, oh sky, whose encircling light we all share. You see how unjustly I suffer.
And that it ends with that focus on the injustice, right?
Yeah, the unrelieved suffering.
Right. And it struck me, so many of the surviving tragedies will end. The chorus sings a little kind of closing song, right? And this one does not. Prometheus himself has the last word.
He gets the last word.
That was really interesting.
Yep. I'd like to read, if I may, a little quote here from a book I'm very fond of.
Yep.
And that is called The Heroic Temper.
Yes.
By Bernad Knox, Studies in Sophoclean Tragedy. Now, you might say, Dave, this is a play by Aeschylus, so why are you regaling us with Sophoclean tragedy? Well, there's a point. Mm-hmm. And so this book was first released in 1964. So Knox says, these are pages 47 and 48. Prometheus goes down below the earth with a final cry of defiance. I am wronged, ectica pasco. In other words, I suffer things that are outside justice. Mm-hmm. Here, it would seem, is the model for the Sophoclean hero. The life of Sophocles tells us quote, that he learned tragedy in the school of Aeschylus. And this analysis seems to suggest strongly that, in fact, Sophocles found in the Prometheus bound the prototype, already clear in outline, of that tragic pattern he was to make peculiarly his own. But of course it is not so simple. These resemblances to Sophoclean character, situation, and language in the Prometheus bound are to be found only there in Aeschylean drama. We cannot trace a development of this particular form through Aeschylean tragedy to Sophocles. The Prometheus bound appears to be, in this respect, a totally new departure in the work of the older poet. Such a thing, of course, is entirely possible. Aeschylus was, after all, the creator of tragedy and innovator on the grand scale. But the trouble is that the Prometheus bound seems to be a totally new departure in his work in every other respect, too.
Okay. All right.
That's highly suggestive, isn't it?
It is very highly suggestive. So this is, we have so little
to
make these judgments upon, right?
Well, the Herculaneum scrolls, did you see the big news this week and the previous week?
I missed that.
So they are being machine read. You know, when they were first discovered, they were subjected to
these carbonized scrolls.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
But this man named Brent Seals has subjected them to X-ray computed tomography.
Okay.
Which is a fancy way of reading them while they're still rolled up and in cinders. And just this week, some students using an AI technique were able to read some of the words on the scroll.
That's crazy.
So maybe we'll get some new tragedy.
A lost play?
That would be wonderful.
That would be
wouldn't
fantastic.
it? I would like to see Ovid's tragedy, The Medea, which is lost.
Right. Yeah,
I would really like to see that.
That would be excellent. Wow. Yeah. Who says there's nothing new?
Yes.
In the canon. This is great.
Yep.
Great news.
So Knox leaves us with that suggestion. Aeschylus set the trajectory for Sophocles. If this isn't even a play by Sophocles, which is always a possibility.
Right. Exactly. Hey, I think I don't have the clock in front of me, but my guess is we are up against it.
We are absolutely up against it.
All right, so we got to get out of here. But before we do, Dave, tell us a little bit about the Moss method, would you?
Yes, I would love to. So the Moss method for Greek is a program that I have developed which will take you from
neophyte to erudite.
That's correct. It'll help you learn how to read Greek at a high level. Just today, I was working on Module 3, finishing up some work on that. Modules 1 and 2 broadly available. I wanted to read a little quote from W. Sidney Allen's Vox Graeca. So this comes from page 125, just very brief. In 1267, 13th century, it was remarked by Roger Bacon that there were not 5 men in Latin Christendom acquainted with the Greek grammar. In 1311, the Council of Vienne recommended the appointment of 2 teachers of Greek in each of the principal cities of Italy. A Greek school was in fact opened in Rome, and money was collected for the founding of a chair at Oxford. In 1325, lectures on Greek were given in the University of Paris for the first time, but the language suffered under the suspicion of heresy. And the numerous treatises on Aristotle listed in the 13th and 14th century catalogues of the Sorbonne show no evidence of acquaintance with the Greek text. In 1360, Petrarch could still count only 8 or 9 Italians in the whole country who knew Greek.
Wow. My God.
So in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Greek knowledge was not widely available, and that's so sad.
Yeah.
But today it is. You can go to mossmethod.com. You can check out the many, many free lessons I have. And if you like what you see and you want to learn some Greek from me, you can sign up for the course. It's a great value, I think.
Fantastic. And if students want to learn Latin from you, they can do that too, right?
That's correct. They go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI, where I have prepared Unit 1, Chapters 1 through 9 of the Familia Romana textbook by Hans Orberg, Lingua Latina, per se illustrata, which I like to translate as Latin teaches itself. Mm-hmm. And sign up for that course. Also, an excellent value. There are a lot of things on the market. Some may be better, but I think in terms of the quality and the price, this is unbeatable.
Fantastic. Yes, do check it out. All right, Dave, we got people to thank.
Yes, we do.
Who do we thank?
We need to thank Mishka.
Of course.
First of all, our wonderful sound engineer who turns these around in record time and makes us sound better than we are, better than we could be.
Indeed. And thanks also to these wonderful musicians, Scott Van Zen and Ken Tamplin, whose guitar playing makes me very, very envious.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. Great stuff.
They can play the guitar just like ringing a bell.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Johnny B. Good. Mm-hmm. So yeah, thanks to those guys. And for for their generosity of allowing us to use their
very, very generous.
So, Dave, if people want a shout out like Mr. Stell,
yes,
if they got a question, they got a comment, what should they do?
They should send an email to jeff@adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V. Be sure to include a little complaint and criticism, or
they can write to Dave@adnauseam.com, and also don't forget that V.
You can go to our website, adnauseam.com, and pick yourself up a nice AN hat, an AN t-shirt, an Erasmus quote t-shirt, Quae nocent, docent, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yep.
Hercules holding up the world, wrestling with a lion, some very interesting images.
Yes, show the world that you are proud that you are one of the people keeping this torch in hand.
Taking it in and keeping it down.
That's right. Hey, Dave, what we got going on next week?
Next week, I think we're going to try something a little bit different. We're going to look at the work of Henri-Irénée Maru.
Oh, wow. That sounds very French.
Yes, I don't even know if I pronounced it correctly. A History of Education in Antiquity.
All right.
So this is a classic book from the 20th century about the classics. A History of Education in Antiquity. Now, it's a big, fat book. I'm not all the way through it. We'll probably have to cut it up into pieces, but we'll just see how it goes. Make it into different episodes, but we'll see how it goes.
Sounds good. Sounds really, really interesting. And I believe you also have our gustatory parting shot.
Yes, I do. Does the name W.C. Fields mean anything to you?
Yes, it does. It means a few things.
Okay.
All right.
What's one of them?
Well, he was kind of a cranky guy, right?
He's a vaudevillian.
Vaudevillian, didn't like children.
Yes.
Drank a lot.
Who does?
All right.
Yes, he was famous for supposedly disliking children.
Right.
So this is what he said. I cook with wine. Sometimes I even add it to the food.
There we go.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.